Live from the Jersey Shore to the world. Get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Take the show wherever you go. Download the free Radio Pup app for your smartphone or tablet. Join the conversation. 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Hey, welcome back. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. 6:06 Thursday, May 26, 65 degrees, heading up to 83 today. WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. News Talk Radio, streaming live on the Radio Pup app and WOBMAM.com. 732-505-1160 to join the conversation. And the conversation now turns to Patrick McNamara, Esquire, from Scarinci Hollenbeck. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jeremy.
Patrick, any truth to the rumor that you got home really late because you were at that T.I. rap concert last night where one was shot, or that you weren't there?
I was not there.
I figured it was a rumor. I thought I saw something on Facebook, but obviously not correct. Patrick, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself, about what kind of law you specialize in? You have an interesting array, an interesting arsenal of things that you deal with.
Thanks. Most of my practice is devoted to land use and redevelopment law, and a lot of the focus of our law firm's practice in that area over the years, as well as doing environmental law, has been in the area of brownfield redevelopment work, and that's targeting older, abandoned, derelict properties and working with our clients to get them redeveloped and construct new facilities or remodel existing facilities that are antiquated and revitalize these properties. A lot of our work has been done in urban areas, in a lot of communities in Hudson, Essex, Union counties, as well as down here in Monmouth County. I've been involved with the Pier Village redevelopment project in Long Branch since its inception back in 2001.
Okay. So I know Pier Village has kind of been in the news recently again as they look to, having nothing to do with you, as they look to kind of change up the mix, I think, a little bit of the businesses that are in that center, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is some litigation with two of the existing tenants, which I'm not involved with. My role has been, we were just in front of the planning board a few weeks ago. We're making some revisions to what we refer to as Phase 3. It's that basically that entire city block that's currently vacant has been used for overflow parking in the summertime. What's going to be coming next is additional retail, about 40 to 50,000 square feet of retail, a new hotel, approximately 80 rooms with 3 restaurants, and another 260-ish residential units of housing. What will be distinct here is this will be condominium ownership rather than rental, which is the existing phases 1 and 2 at Pier Village. The boardwalk segment is going to be completely replaced. We're going to add a new carousel and other public gathering spaces to really make it that much more of a family-friendly type destination, not just in the summertime, but most of the year, because the carousel will be in a facility where it can be enclosed in the wintertime.
Wow, that's great. It's really is a great a great setup that they have there, and has really kind of helped revitalize that area. I was just at a wedding there actually 3 weeks ago at the Avenue, and God, what a difference it was from 20 years ago when I used to go there as a young adult. To that area, and not the same kind of setup as we have now. So great work there. How are you seeing, in your experience in North Jersey and down through Monmouth County, are you experiencing the same kind of pushback that we kind of are experiencing here in Ocean County? Around, it seems like there's an intensified movement around stopping sprawl, quote unquote. Is that something you're seeing throughout, or is that just something that's specific to Ocean County?
It's not specific necessarily to Ocean County. I have seen it elsewhere. It's a matter where people are concerned about existing traffic infrastructure. There's a lot more concern in some communities about impact on schools. I recently went through a lot of this because I represent the Kushner companies, not only with regard to Pier Village, but also to their proposal to repurpose the Monmouth Mall. Right. And a lot of people expressed real concerns about traffic impact, about impact on schools, about impact on the community. And so we were asked to do a lot of reports, which were posted on the borough's own website, as well as a lot of Q&A that the borough's professionals responded to people within the community about those kinds of concerns. Unfortunately, the borough decided not to proceed with the ordinance change, and we'll have to see where things head.
Yeah, and it's that was an interesting situation because I think when the Kushner group did that big mic drop at the meeting, I think that certainly threw everyone for a loop, including the folks that were heavily against the project, because then the reality that this kind of revitalization of Eatontown project I think wasn't going to happen. It was like, whoa. Well, we wanted some revisions. We didn't necessarily want the whole project to go away, but I guess that's the risk you run. I'm very interested also because you have a whole separate arm of what you do that revolves around flavor and fragrance. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I got involved with it through a client who I knew from another line of work about 20 years ago. And I started getting involved in representing these trade groups of companies that manufacture flavor ingredients or fragrance ingredients. One of the things I've learned, although I certainly don't profess to with a background in history and political science, I'm no flavor chemist, but one of the things I did learn is it won't taste like lemon if it doesn't smell like lemon.
Right.
How much smell affects taste. The flavor industry is concentrated in 4 or 5 areas here in the United States, primarily here in the tri-state area, the Cincinnati, Chicago area, down south, Georgia, Florida, and then the West Coast. And over the years, I've had the chance to represent a number of smaller family-held companies in the industry, although over the last 15 or 20 years, there's been a tremendous number of mergers and acquisitions as the industry has become increasingly global in nature. And so when you see companies here in New Jersey like IFF, they're one of the largest companies globally with thousands of employees worldwide. So it's a nice group of people to be involved with, and we've provided a whole range of services from intellectual property to issues involving non-compete agreements and trade secrets, which is the heart of the industry, to antitrust issues, to defending companies in various types of litigation, regulatory compliance, whether it's environmental, whether it's OSHA, whether it's state or federal. Transportation issues are big because of all of the changes that have happened since 9/11 and all the regulatory requirements about proper labeling for shipping things, even if it's just in a single 1-ounce bottle. So it hasn't gotten any easier like it hasn't for most other industries. There are just that many more new rules each year that you've got to make sure you comply with just in the normal course of doing business.
Right. How do you end up in a niche like that, though? I mean, do you end up just kind of working with one company, and then one company becomes 2 companies, and then all of a sudden you become a subject matter expert on that whole deal? Is that how that works?
It started in the early 90s. I was the municipal attorney here in Aberdeen Township where I grew up, and one of the members of the town council was running a small trade association of these companies and said, "Hey, Pat, we have issues with environmental matters, with these other matters. Could you guys help us?" And I said, "Sure." And so I became general counsel to one group called the National Association of, it was then Fruits, Flavors, and Syrups. Now it's the National Association of Food and Flavor Ingredient Systems. And it's a trade association of flavor companies and associate members, shippers, other types of vendors. And that led me to the opportunity to meet people who were executives of smaller companies who needed assistance on occasion, and that's how I was able to start developing that little niche.
Wow, that's very cool. It really is interesting because I'm going to guess that when you were back in law school, you weren't saying to yourself, "Gosh, one day I really want to be the general counsel to the National Association of Flavor and Food Ingredient Systems." I mean, that wasn't one of those things that you were thinking as you were working your way through, right?
Absolutely right. Now, when I went to law school, I was focused in looking to do land use and environmental work because a lot of it was new. When I started law school in the fall of 1983, people were still just trying to sort out how the Superfund program worked. It had only become law 3 years earlier.
Right.
So what I found interesting is this is a whole new area of law. It's going to impact no matter what you do virtually in any realm of business, in land use development, in regulatory compliance, in running your business. And I thought, well, this is something that's interesting. It's new. There's certainly going to be need for it. I mean, as we've learned here in New Jersey in dealing with thousands of contaminated properties, whether it's the mom and pop gas station that's been left behind all the way up to these larger tank farms, industrial facilities, old refineries that aren't being used anymore. We've got a wide gamut of legacy properties that we're dealing with here.
Right. Well, and that's a great segue to what I wanted to talk about when we come back. And I don't know how familiar you are with it, but certainly in Ocean County, one of the largest topics of conversation for years and years and years now has been the old Ciba-Geigy/BASF property, which is obviously brownfield property and obviously has a little bit of history of contamination. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, just high level, because I know you're not as intimately involved as you are in certainly so many other projects. Is that okay when we come back?
Sure thing.
Awesome. Patrick McNamara, Esquire, Scarinci Hollenbeck, back. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin right after this.
The Sean Hannity Show, this afternoon at 3. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin returns next. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.
Hey, welcome back. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin here with Patrick McNamara, Esquire, Scarinci Hollenbeck. So, Patrick, first of all, just before we get too far into this, you have nothing to do with that BASF land or anything like that, right?
No, I don't.
All right, good. So we're just talking very high level here. I know, I know that I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but when we look at a piece of land like that, which is obviously tremendous and could be on some level a game changer for the economics of an area, what needs to happen on a piece of property like that for it to be developable?
Well, first you have to look at what is the nature and extent of the contamination. How bad is bad, proverbially speaking? And what type of contaminants are you dealing with? And are they the type that could potentially pose a risk to human health? New Jersey has two different sets of cleanup standards, one for non-residential uses and the other, obviously, far more stringent standards for residential uses. Over the course of the years, we've developed a system where people recognize what level of cleanup is necessary in order to take a new type of use to a property. So that's the first thing that needs to be assessed, is looking at what's there. Is it reasonably productive from an economic standpoint to redevelop the property for a certain type of use? What is the cleanup going to cost? How long is it going to take? And can you still then make money at the other end of the deal at the end of the day when you try to redevelop the property with a certain use? Certain properties that are pretty badly contaminated, that the cost factor of going to a residential cleanup level isn't there, you look to do, say, industrial warehouse, because then the warehouse and the parking lot become what is commonly called as the engineering and institutional control. Effectively, it functions like a cap on the property. We've done some of those in places like Newark, where there's a demand for warehouse space because they're looking ahead to the day when these Panamax ships come in and the amount of container traffic they are going to bring into our ports is going to triple.
Right. There's
a need for warehouse space to unpack and repack all those containers. So it's a great use. It creates hundreds of construction jobs, hundreds of permanent jobs, and it takes an old artifact abandoned site and makes it productive again. That's the kind of analysis that people need to do when you're taking a look at a brownfield site and saying, what is it going to cost to turn it around, and can you recoup that cost with what type of new development?
Right. So I think in this particular case, and I don't know what your opinion might be, but you have a company that owns this particular piece of land, like a BASF, that obviously tremendous company owns property throughout the state, throughout the country, that and owns a lot of brownfield property as well, right? So the question becomes, if and you would know this very well, if you were leveraging and let's say being willing to sacrifice certain tracts of land in exchange for other tracts of land that could be deemed developable. You might sacrifice some property, let's say, in Ocean County in lieu of some land, let's say, in North Jersey. Would that be fair to say?
It might. It depends, again, on how bad is bad in terms of what are you looking at in terms of projected cleanup costs and what can you redevelop the property with. What's compatible with the rest of the area?
Right.
And is there a demand for that type of use? So do you have a demand in Ocean County for a 500,000 square foot size industrial warehouse, and would you divide it up into 10, 50,000 square foot units or 20 even smaller units as opposed to a single user? Part of what you try to do when you're looking at redevelopment is an economic analysis of what's out there, what is there a demand for, what is there a need for, and can this site be used to fit that need?
Right.
One of the things you try to look at when you're doing redevelopment is not just saying, well, let's designate it for redeveloper and maybe somebody will come along with a great idea. Part of it is writing a redevelopment plan, and if you're doing it properly, part of that then becomes, well, are we projecting out the type of uses that we know are needed and make sense for the community and make sense from an economic standpoint that someone can come in and do it and actually make a buck at the end of the day when you factor in the cost of cleanup or some cleanup and capping the property or some combination.
Right. Patrick McNamara, can you hang with us one more segment?
Sure.
Cool. So when we come back, we're going to give you your magic wand with your ability to change something in your sector. I'd also like, if you don't mind, very, very high level. This is a constant discussion point now. Is what does it mean to rezone something? And can you rezone something, let's say, I don't know, for religious use? Wake up with Jeremy Grunin back after the 6:30 break. Thanks.
The news never stops at WOBMAM.com. Get the latest from WOBM News, the Town Square, New Jersey News Network, and Fox News Radio. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin, News Talk Radio, WOBMAM 1160 and 1310. Live from the Bob Levy Broadcast Center, overlooking the Toms River, it's time to get up, get out, do something. Wake up with Jeremy Grunin. Be a part of the show, 732-505-1160. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. Listen online at WOBMAM.com.
Hey, welcome back. 6:34, Thursday, May 26, 65 degrees, got up to 83 today. WOBM AM 1160 and 1310. News Talk Radio, streaming live on the Radio Pop app and WOBMAM.com, 732-505-1160 to join the conversation. We are here with Patrick McNamara, Esquire, partner, Scarinci Hollenbeck. So, Patrick, I know it's a very sensitive topic in Monmouth and Ocean County, but just like quick overview, there's a lot of discussion as to rezoning around places of worship / schools, etc. Can you give us there's a discussion around what's an accepted use, what's not an accepted use, what's good for society, what's not good for society. What does the letter of the law kind of say around rezoning in those ways?
It's a variety of laws that come into play because you've got municipal zoning ordinances, and then you have a federal law called RLUIPA, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. It was passed by Congress about 15 years ago. And what it did is basically it addressed also issues not only about what rights of religious worship prisoners have, but also about preventing towns and counties from using land use ordinances to discriminate or preclude houses of worship from their communities. And what happens then is people bring these actions in federal court saying, hey, you don't want to allow me to bring my house of worship to your community. I was involved with one for some homeowners a few years ago up in Bridgewater, and it wound up in federal court where people wanted to come in and take an old catering hall that had been empty for many years, had been built in the 1940s, called the Redwood Inn, and turn it into a mosque. And they also wanted to add a school, community services, and the like. And the overriding concern of the community was it was a small piece of property. It was only about 4 or 5 acres. There were wetlands on it. It had a limited amount of parking. And in the area where they wanted to put it, there was no real on-street parking. It was very narrow, old streets, and it really didn't fit there. And unfortunately, after several years of litigation, it did get resolved, and they found a different property in another part of Bridgewater that was right on a major artery, plenty of open space, plenty of parking, where it really fit a lot better. Because I literally represented homeowners whose backyards were literally going to abut the parking lot of that original facility. So you bring a lot of different laws into play. And unfortunately, in part of the controversy around it, people were making all sorts of derogatory comments, and I'll be polite and just use that phrase.
Sure.
That would make you cringe. And so, unfortunately, you run into that element and the fear-mongering and the stuff that gets all over social media, and it's really unfortunate. Now there's another case out there. I think it's in Bernards Township. Same thing again. It's a mosque, and there are people who are opposed to it, not only in terms of just legitimate concerns about traffic and parking, and they go beyond that into the area of, it's going to be an Al-Qaeda terrorist training camp kind of comments, and worse, unfortunately. So you do run into that. And in most towns, what they will do is make sure that in certain areas of the community, houses of worship are permitted. In many communities, they're permitted or what's called a conditional use almost anywhere because they're a relatively low-impact type of use. They don't put a tremendous demand on municipal services, traffic impact on weekends versus weekdays. If they're not running a school or other types of community service, traffic impact on a Saturday or a Sunday really isn't that much in terms of what it does to local or county roadways. So usually they're fairly compatible with most other types of uses. Where you run into an issue is where you may have a town that, for whatever reason, doesn't have them as a permitted use, which would strike me as a little bit odd. Most towns usually automatically have them in residential areas because, especially in older communities, people used to walk to their house of worship.
Sure.
Or if it's an Orthodox synagogue, people walk because they don't use their car on the Sabbath. So it needs to be within walking distance of their homes. Where I live here in Aberdeen, we have 3 synagogues. We have Orthodox, we have Reform, and we have Conservative, as well as Yeshiva. So, they provide parking where they need it or they don't, and they're right in the heart of the residential part of the community.
Right. And so most of the issues, really come from when we try to go to that next level, which is the school level, or when we try to make more of it than just as a house of worship. Because I think that as you said, the people's ability to worship should not be impacted. But what has to be impacted is when it makes a change on a residential neighborhood to become a traffic issue, to become a safety issue, to put kids in harm's way, et cetera, et cetera. That's when it has to be discussed. Any impact? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a legitimate concern.
Right.
And if a zoning ordinance is done properly, it zones these in an area where the road net, especially in areas that are growing and having new development, it's easier to plan in that sense and make sure that you're providing for houses of worship in areas where the road system can handle it and the lots are big enough that they can accommodate the parking or come up with some type of shared parking formula so that you can adequately provide parking for people both during the week and whether they're attending services on a Friday, Saturday, or a Sunday.
Cool. Any impact? It was just came out yesterday. Any impact that when the Justice Department gets involved and starts investigating a particular town zoning laws? Is that should that be concerning? Is that typical protocol when there's a federal suit involved, or what's that all about?
It's rare for the Justice Department or the U.S. Attorney's Office to get involved in these kind of lawsuits. They certainly did not get involved, to my memory, in Bridgewater. I don't know if they've gotten involved in what goes on in Bernards Township, because in some of this litigation, not only do people bring these lawsuits under that law I referred to earlier, the religious land use law, but also people start trying to bring in either the New Jersey law against discrimination or the federal civil rights laws and say, hey, you're you're violating my constitutional rights to freedom of worship under the First Amendment and the parallel provisions under our New Jersey state constitution. And at that point, there's the possibility of potential involvement from the U.S. Attorney's Office or from the Justice Department in those types of cases.
Right, because that just came out that Toms River was now being investigated by the U.S. Department of Justice, which certainly changes the game a little bit around the stakes. Anyway, Patrick, real quick, because we only have about a minute left. If you had a magic wand and had the ability to make an impact, what would you do? How would you wave it? What would you change?
In the realm of what I've done in environmental law, what I really like to see changed is that we reprioritize how we deal with regulating industry, in the sense that I don't think we do nearly enough to look at changing industrial processes and manufacturing processes to prevent pollution. Everything we've done in almost every regulatory program has been this cradle-to-grave approach of regulating everything that comes out the proverbial tailpipe or exhaust pipe or whatever at the end of the process. I think we need to focus a lot more on what can we do working collaboratively with manufacturers and other companies to come up with pollution prevention technology. What can we do to change the manufacturing process? What can we do to change the mix of chemicals or raw ingredients that are being used so that we reduce all types of emissions, whether it's solid waste, hazardous waste, air emissions, and the like? I think we need to focus a lot more on that and try to assist not only private industry, but work collaboratively with our universities at Rutgers and Princeton and elsewhere to develop this type of technology and become an incubator for that type of technology and grow that, and then be able not only to put it to use here in New Jersey, but export it elsewhere nationally and internationally to deal with trying to improve our environment, and at the same time come up with ways that create jobs instead of potentially discouraging jobs, because we do have some of the toughest environmental laws in the country here in New Jersey, and it is a discouragement, I think, to private industry. Let's find ways to change the process, and in turn then use that as a way of growing technology and growing jobs.
Right. Very good. Patrick McNamara, ScarinciHollenbeck.com. That's SCARINCI Hollenbeck, HOLLENBECK.com. If you want to learn more or connect with Patrick. Anything else? Any last parting shots, Mr. McNamara?
No, I appreciate the chance, and it's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Patrick McNamara, Esquire, Scarinci Hollenbeck. Wake Up with Jeremy Grunin, back after this.